Okay, because this is part of a 3-course dinner tonight, I'm going to do a sweet that's not too heavy and not too big. I'm going to do what's called a whole pear pie. So I'm using Packham pears because they're in season. I haven't chosen big ones because it's the end of a meal and we don't want a heavy meal at the end, but we want something with a bit of flavour. So I'm going to poach the pears in sugar water. So the first step I'm going to do is I've got 1.5 litres of water in my small boiler and 3/4 of a cup of caster sugar, and I'm going to keep that on a medium heat until all the sugar has dissolved. And while it's dissolving, I'm going to add the zest of 1 lemon, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. As you can see, it's quite thick. Once the sugar has dissolved, and you can't see any crystals in the bottom, I'm going to bring the sugar water up to the boil. Once it's boiling, I'm going to add my peeled pears. I'm not going to do anything about the cores just yet. I'm going to peel them and leave the stalks in. Sit these into the water and poach them for about 25 minutes, turning them halfway if they're not completely covered in the water. So that halfway through cooking I'm going to come and check that they're all getting a good covering with the liquid, and then they'll be ready and we can put those aside till later tonight when we put the rest of the recipe together. For our recipe we're going to need sheets of frozen short crust pastry cut into 1.5 centimetre strips, a baking tray with baking paper on it. We're going to make a chocolate ganache as our sauce, which will be cream that we bring to the boil. Then we take off the boil and add our chocolate and melt our chocolate into it to make a really lovely ganache. And then I'm going to go to my go-to caramel pie fill, my Nestle in the tin. I'm going to heat that, make that into a sauce, and then we're going to pour the chocolate sauce and the caramel sauce over the wrapped and baked pears, dust them with icing sugar, and then pour the sauce just over one side. And we serve that with whipped cream and with a connoisseur ice cream. We can have what you like. We've decided on a light vanilla caramel swirl ice cream that we'll serve our pears with. But I'll show you more of that later once we've got to the next stage. So now we're just slowly dissolving the sugar on a medium heat. Once it's all dissolved, I'll turn it up to bring the sugar water to the boil, and then I'll gently lower the pears in and poach them. When you're choosing your pears, make sure you choose nice firm pears and try and get pears that are all about the same size. The other thing you want the pears to do is to stand freely by themselves, because once they're in the oven baking you want them to be able to stand. So just to recap, in my boiler here I've got 1.5 litres of water, 3/4 of a cup of caster sugar, the zest of 1 lemon and a teaspoon of vanilla seed pod. I've brought that up to a slow heat to start with to dissolve the sugar, then I brought it up to the boil. Now it's taken quite a few minutes to bring it up to the boil. And now I'm going to gently lower my pears into the water. And we're going to poach those. That's good, they're all going to be covered. You see how they're floating? I'm just going to turn those over in a little while so that these bits that are exposed from the water will actually get, they'll be soft right through. Now the other thing to mention is the pears at this stage are whole. I haven't cored them. We need them, the core and everything inside, to hold the shape while they're poaching and softening. We're going to set the timer for 15 minutes to have a look, and then I'll spin them over. Okay, the pears have been poaching now for 15 minutes. I'm just going to gently turn each one over. Being careful not to dig into the pear. Keep it boiling for another 10 minutes. The pears are ready to come out now. I'm going to use a slotted spoon to remove each one carefully. And these need to cool completely. Okay, the pears have had time to cool now, so I'm going to core them by using an apple corer, inserting it halfway up into the pear, twisting. I'm going to cover these now so that they don't dry out, just in a plastic bag, till it's time to wrap them in the pastry. Okay, it's time to wrap the pears. Now that we've cored earlier, we're going to take one strip of the pastry, starting at the top. That's all right. Just going to wrap each pear. Until it's completely covered. Okay. Okay, now they've all been wrapped. I'm just going to lightly brush with the egg.
I don't know whether it was the trip we did into town, I took you down, and there was one down the end. Yeah. Too much weight. And, you know, what, 40 odd tonne or 70 odd tonne?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it depends how much is back there, you know.
Yeah.
Now preheated the oven for 200 degrees.
Yep. And a friend of mine.
And I'm going to bake these for 20 to 25 minutes.
Cancer, he said he's spoken to him.
Okay, so it's time to plate up.
Yeah. Oh.
You don't have to be quiet, it's okay. This is a family YouTube thing. We had Wesley talking out loud to Mum one day.
Alright.
So that's alright. The family's used to us having people around. Whoops. To plate up, we're going to dust each pear with icing sugar.
Yep, look at that.
Now in here is my chocolate ganache. So what I've done is I had 100 mils of cream that I brought to the boil. When it was boiling, I took it off the heat and I added 100 mils of dark chocolate.
Oh, that was in Africa when they
And now for the caramel, I've heated a tin of the caramel pie and fill in the stove. That goes over near the chocolate.
There we go, look at that.
And then
Wow.
our caramel swirl ice cream.
Oh yeah, we're going to pay for the interstate float.
So there we have our whole pie.